As we look at Brunel's viaduct, it is hard to imagine that amongst the formal ISIS Memorial Gardens once stood the first Hayle railway station. Long before the viaduct was built, this station was opened in 1835 at the start of the line that ran via the harbour and on to Redruth. When Brunel's viaduct was built and the railway was opened in 1852, then this little station became redundant and housed the local Women's Institute until the building was demolished in 1948 in order to improve the visibility to the increasing number of motorists. The superseded railway line was eventually removed in the 1970s, although it continued to be used until the mid-1930s, with wagons being hauled by Shire horses. The new station was built in 1852, and whilst all of the historical features have been removed, it still serves stopping trains. It is from the current station that the Hayle Harbour Railway was operated from 1852 to its closure in 1978, with some local industry continuing to use it into the 1980s and the eventual removal of the tracks in the same decade. This is the line that we shall look at. Before we visit the station, we shall look at this bridge, which holds the start of the spur of the 1 in 30 drop single line down to the harbour. It is squeezed between the viaduct and the platform and carried the line to the sidings and the harbour wharf. All the glory of the Great Western has long since gone. The downside platform to Penzance no longer has a ticket office or waiting room. The engine shed has given way to a car park, and the isolated siding holds a camping coach waiting for summer visitors. The pedestrian overbridge has been removed and passengers are allowed to cross the rails to the up platform using the signal lights. Behind the blue painted metal fencing there was the upside goods loop, which allowed trains to be loaded and unloaded with access to the main line at both ends of the station. The upside platform to Plymouth no longer has the unique 35 lever signal box, which was demolished in 1982, and a small passenger shelter occupies the footprint of the more traditional waiting room. the water tower on a brick masonry plinth, and the engine shed and a shunter's hut, together with a goods and marshalling yard consisting of 3 sidings, were all located on the high level ground. We shall now walk the length of the old track bed down to the main road and look at anything of interest on the way. Please bear with me if the camera view wobbles a little as I walk. Here we can see the buffer end of the sidings. Note that at this point the ground level of the sidings is the same level as our heads, thus indicating the severe gradient of this old track bed. At this point we can see where some further old buildings were. The steam engines, which were tank engines from the Long Rock Penzance depot in the earlier years, and diesel in the twilight years, would reverse down this steep 1 in 30 incline, as there were no turntable facilities in the harbour. Just to the left, prior to this overhead bridge, there was a small siding of about 200 feet. Here the railway crossed the busy main A30 trunk road, or Hayle Terrace to the locals, to the swing bridge opposite. There was a set of points which allowed a train descending into the harbour to either go straight across the road onto the swing bridge, thus passing Hayle Wharf signal box on your left, or turn to the left and with the signal box on your right pass on to the quay. The area where the points used to be accounts for why the house adjacent to them appears to have lost a slice of their garden. This low brick wall, representing the front base wall, is all that is left of the Hayle Wharf signal box, which was closed in 1964. It was replaced by a ground frame, and the train crew operated the crossing gates to bring road traffic to a halt. Later, the gates were replaced with raisable barriers. The current brick building, which housed the gears and chains for operating the old sluice gate, was restored in the last few years but is no longer functional. The modern sluice gates replaced the older ones, and sluicing was an essential practice to stop the navigable channels from silting up. The practice of sluicing stopped in the 1970s, and the damaged banks of the canal have now merged with the estuary, making the canal difficult to identify at times. The first railway crossed this point in 1835 on a wooden drawbridge. This was replaced in 1880 with the current cast iron swing bridge made by the local firm of Harveys. The left-hand one was for horse-drawn vehicles and pedestrian traffic, and the right-hand bridge for the new railway line. It crosses the Copperhouse Canal to join Merchants Colonel's Quay and North Quay, and will be open to allow cargo vessels to sail up to the quays at Copperhouse Port. It was operated by hand and was probably last opened in 1934 or 1935 when a crowd gathered to see a 400-ton coaster loaded with grain for milling steam up into Copperhouse Pool for unloading at Paddy's tidal watermill at the head of Copperhouse Canal. Maybe by then steam power had been installed and the grain would have been milled at Paddy's or Logan's mill, both of which were converted for the use of steam engines. On this site of Bristolman's Dock, beside the slipway, once stood the Steam Packet Inn. It was built in 1843 and was named the Britannia, but later changed its name to Burt's House after the landlord William Burt. It was finally named the Steam Packet Inn due to the landing of passengers from the Hayle to Bristol ferry service, which started and terminated here. Sadly, the building was demolished in 1961, but the current rail tracks pass within a few feet of the edge of the former building. As we look at the remains of the railway lines that go into the area where the local fishermen currently store their equipment and crab pots, it is hard to realise that originally this was the site of a quarry, which I guess was used to dig out the stone to build the harbour walls. Once its primary use was completed, it became the home of the Hayle lifeboat station. The first lifeboat was called the Isis and saved 45 lives during its 21 years of service before being replaced in 1887 by the F. Harrison and again in 1907 with the Admiral Rod, shortly before the station was moved to St Ives in 1920. Finally, it became Esso's oil storage depot, and hence the need for railway siding. Oil was brought in by coastal tankers and left by rail for distribution. These two remaining buildings are all of what is left of Associated Octel's bromine extractor plant, which carried out a very important wartime project to produce the anti-knock element for aviation fuel. It was known as SG-3, Secret Government Project 3, and operated from 1939 until 1973. Originally, the chemical plant produced magnesium from seawater, but later produced bromine. It took waste steam from the power station and seawater through a tunnel under the harbour quay, and then discharged the toxic effluents through another pipe into the river. All major engineering feats at its time, but killing all the marine life in Copperhouse Port. We are now looking at the main site of Associated Octel, but today it is used to recycle building rubble and separate good soil into usable quantities. The chimney stack in the wall beside the entrance is all that is left of the 19th century Hayle arsenic works, which was then taken over by the county's only glass works in 1917 and continued to 1925. The abundance of local sand and china clay waste were the ideal raw materials. This is the site of the old power station, which was built in 1910 and fuelled by coal brought in by coasters from Wales and unloaded by the quayside directly into large overhead hoppers onto a conveyor taking the coal straight over the road to the power station. It was Cornwall's main power source, and until the mid-1920s it provided electricity for the Redruth to Camborne tramway. Before the cables carrying electricity to Penzance and beyond were sunk into the bed of the estuary, overhead cables were suspended between the plant and Leyland, and with the inevitable slack that appeared in the tension of the lines, and on exceptional high tides it did, on occasion, interfere with shipping. It was closed in 1977 and demolished in 1982 and replaced with a modern transformer station. Rails still run in many areas of the wharves, and although a large proportion were officially lifted in 1971, many appear to still await their removal. This pile of neatly stacked and well-weathered sleepers were recovered and placed ready for collection. Despite being left in the same place for the last 30 years, they still await collection. Here is a surviving run of granite setts, or sleepers, from the original 1835 railway. And here are some relatively modern wooden sleepers still waiting to be lifted. The dereliction of Hayle Harbour has remained preserved in time since local industries have closed or drifted away. There have been new owners, each making promises of regenerating the area, and if the current owners' plans for the future come to fruition, then all traces of the Hayle Harbour Railway will be gone. If you listen carefully and the wind is in the right direction, then you may be able to hear the ghost sounds of the Harbour Railway in action. But for the moment, part of Shelley's poem Ozymandias seems appropriate. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing besides remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away.